I was the one who paid for it, all the flights, the hotel, the private tours, $30,000 for a trip my father had always dreamed of. But in the end, the only thing I got was a single text message. "We've decided Daniel will go instead of you. He'll take better pictures." That was it. No thanks. No sorry. No, we love you. Just a verdict dropped on my phone like a guillotine. My name wasn't even mentioned. They didn't say you're out. They said he's in. As if I'd never existed in the plan at all. My name is Harper Lane, 34 systems architect in Denver. I grew up in a family where I always thought love had to be earned. Straight A's, full rides, weekend jobs at 15, but it was never enough. So this trip, it wasn't a vacation. It was a thank you gift, a chance to say to my dad, "You mattered to me." And he had smiled when I told him the first genuine smile in years. I saw something flicker in his eyes that reminded me of childhood before bills and bitterness. For a brief moment, I believed maybe we could reconnect. Maybe all those years of being invisible would finally count for something. But they gave my seat to Daniel, my sister's fiancé of 11 months, a man who'd once suggested I fund his startup idea that already existed on the App Store. A man who left the dinner table whenever the check came, but always made sure to give a long speech about leveraging opportunity. I stared at the text, motionless. The group chat glowed like a wound. I didn't reply. What was I supposed to say? "Thank you for the betrayal. Hope he enjoys the Falcon show." Instead, I leaned back in my office chair and whispered to no one, "Okay." But inside, something quiet snapped. I'd spent months planning this, researching the best suites in Jumeirah, securing first-class seats, curating every moment from a sky dinner to desert rides. I didn't just spend money. I spent hope. I spent forgiveness. I spent a part of me that still wanted to belong. And in return, I got erased. You know what hurt most? Not that they gave away the seat, but that they did it without hesitation. No conversation. No remorse. Just a quiet reshuffling like I was a replaceable piece on their family chessboard. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I opened my laptop. I created a new spreadsheet, named it Dubai Recovery. On it, flight info, hotel reservation numbers, excursion contacts, and next to each item, I typed one word in bold mine. Then I opened another sheet, debt ledger. At the top, I listed their names. This wasn't about revenge, not yet. It was about accounting. Because when your worth is only measured by what you give, sometimes you have to stop giving to remember who you are. And if you've ever felt erased from your own story, if you've ever poured everything into people who don't even see your name anymore, leave a like. Stay with me. This isn't just a story. It's a reckoning. If you've ever been pushed aside after giving your all, let's take this journey together. Let's find out what happens when the one they erased starts writing the ending. I didn't cry. That's not how I process betrayal. Instead, I opened Excel. The sound of my fingers tapping on the keys was the only thing in the room. Outside, Denver's skyline was fading into that flat blue dusk, but I didn't notice. I was staring at the screen-building columns like armor. Dubai Recovery. I gave it that name like it was a rescue mission, because that's exactly what it was. Not to save the money, to save my dignity. I listed out everything. Emirates booking number, hotel reservation at the Palm, tour operators, and refund policies. And next to each one in all caps, I typed mine. Then I opened a second tab. I called this one Debt Ledger. At the top, I typed Dad, Mom, Delaney, Daniel. Then I started doing the kind of math that doesn't involve numbers, it involves memory. Like the time I bought my second condo back in 2019, 2-bedroom, modern layout, great location just outside Capitol Hill. I had intended it as an investment, a rental property to build equity. But then Dad's carpentry work dried up. He and Mom said they just needed a few months to get back on their feet. So I handed them the keys. No lease, no deposit, just trust. Rent, I set it at $850 a month. The market value was nearly double that, but I didn't care. They were family. Until month 6 when payments got irregular. Then they stopped altogether. By the end of year 2, I had stopped asking. Not because I didn't need the money, but because I didn't want to become that kind of daughter. The kind who measures love in invoices. When Delaney, my younger sister, broke up with her roommate over creative differences, she moved in too. Along with 6 oversized suitcases, a designer purse collection, and Daniel the fiancé, whose biggest asset was his jawline and an expired LLC. They used the condo like it was a hotel suite I forgot I owned. I'd stop by to fix things, leaking sinks, broken tiles, and they'd treat me like a property manager on probation. No gratitude, no courtesy, just casual entitlement. Last fall, they bought a $700 espresso machine, the same one I had sitting in my Amazon cart for months. I found it on their counter next to a half-used bottle of oat milk and Daniel's startup pitch deck. Once Delaney used my Instacart account to order $120 worth of kombucha and imported sushi. When I sent her a Venmo request, she replied, "Wow, Harper, it's not that serious. We're family." But that's the thing, it was serious. Because every ignored text, every late payment, every assumption stacked up until one day, I looked around and realized my love for them had turned into a silent debt no one planned to repay. That morning after the text about the Dubai seat, I didn't just start counting dollars. I started counting dignity, and I realized I was overdrafted. I updated the spreadsheet, labeled every transaction. Then I called a locksmith and scheduled a full lock change for Friday. If they were going to treat me like a landlord, then it was time they saw the paperwork. Some people process grief with tears, some with silence. Me, I use spreadsheets. Because when your own family treats you like a backup plan, the only thing left to do is audit the relationship line by line. And if you've ever been the one carrying everyone's weight without so much as a thank you, if you've ever been gaslit into believing love means sacrifice without limits, leave a comment. I want to know how you handled it, because maybe you and I have more in common than we think. I never bought that condo for them, but somehow it stopped being mine. Back in 2019, I was 28, finally making enough as a systems architect to start building real equity. The second condo was supposed to be the first domino in a slow wealth strategy, an investment property I could lease out at market rate and let time do its thing. Instead, it became the place where my family took shelter and then stayed indefinitely. When Dad's union contract dried up during COVID and Mom got laid off from the school district, they asked if they could just use it for a while. It was framed like a temporary solution, a way to avoid shame. They didn't want to move in with Delaney. They didn't want to burden me. So I said yes. Of course I said yes. I didn't ask for a lease. I didn't ask for a deposit. Just one rule, $850 per month, which barely covered mortgage and utilities. That first payment came on time, the second late, the third forgotten. By year one, the phrase "we're just figuring things out" was a regular chorus in our group chat. By year two, even the apologies stopped. I had built a home. They made it theirs. Delaney moved in after a fallout with her roommates. Apparently, they didn't respect her creative process. She brought with her not just belongings, but Daniel, a man who wore ambition like cologne strong and vaguely unpleasant. He parked in my spot, left his sneakers in my hallway, called me sis even though we'd barely spoken before. That fall, they installed a full-size espresso machine in the kitchen. One I recognized instantly because it had been sitting in my Amazon wish list for over a year. The price tag $699. They hadn't paid rent in 11 months. I didn't yell, I didn't confront, I just stopped visiting. But that didn't mean I stopped noticing. The thermostat was constantly set to 75. Water usage spiked. I'd get monthly alerts from the HOA about noise complaints, hallway clutter, and once a neighbor's dog traumatized by repeated howling. They had a dog. I began documenting it, all receipts, missed, rent photos, emails. Not because I intended to use them, but because some part of me needed proof I wasn't crazy. That what I was feeling, the quiet suffocation, was real. And Delaney, she was gifted at turning every confrontation into guilt. When I asked her to pay for groceries after she used my Instacart account without asking, she called me cold. "You act like you're running a business, Harper. This is family." But it did feel like a business, just a failing one. High output, zero return, emotionally bankrupt. I was subsidizing their comfort while being called selfish for keeping score. Still, I stayed silent. For years, I told myself love meant not keeping tally, that I was being generous, that family didn't need receipts. But that's the thing about generosity, it only works when it's not expected, when it's not abused. So that night, after I added yet another entry to the ledger, 6 missed rent payments, $620, I stared at the total and said aloud to no one, "This isn't kindness, it's debt." I didn't owe them comfort. I didn't owe them silence. And I certainly didn't owe them a seat on a $30,000 trip after they erased me without blinking. If you've ever been in that spot watching the people you love rewrite your name off the ledger like it never existed, then you know what I mean. It's not about money, it's about memory, about dignity. If that hits home, tell me in the comments how you reclaimed your space. Because that night I was done being generous. I was ready to be fair. The first time I met Daniel, he introduced himself like he was pitching a brand partnership. He reached out his hand and said, "I've heard you're the backbone of this family's legacy capital. We should talk strategy sometime." I blinked. I'd just finished unclogging the upstairs bathroom sink, the one Delaney's dog had apparently mistaken for a bath, and here he was standing in my hallway like a TED Talk in sneakers. Daniel was the type of guy who used words like disruption and synergy with a straight face. Always dressed like a second-tier Silicon Valley founder Patagonia vest over a hoodie, expensive sneakers, a smartwatch that pinged every 10 minutes even though I never saw him take a call. According to Delaney, he was a visionary in the co-living innovation space. When I asked what that meant, she blinked and said it's kind of like housing but smarter. He didn't have a job. He had ideas, big ones, vague ones, always involving other people's money. Over dinner one night, he pitched me a startup and app that connects dog owners with emotionally compatible dog walkers. I Googled it under the table. There were already 3 like it funded functioning and better, but Delaney was smitten. Daniel thinks in 5 dimensions, she told me once, as if I should be impressed. He's not meant for a desk. He's building a movement he couldn't even build a resume. Mom called him charming. Dad just nodded a lot, probably too tired to argue. The house was always loud now, always crowded. My condo had become a startup incubator without my permission. When I announced the Dubai trip at Sunday dinner, everything felt still, just for a moment. Dad's eyes lit up like I hadn't seen since I was a teenager. He pulled out his old book on desert architecture, talked about the Burj Khalifa, the way kids talk about spaceships. For 5 minutes, I felt something warm crack through the years of cold silence. Then Delaney tilted her head and said, "Can Daniel come?" I paused, not because I didn't expect it, but because I did. "No," I said calmly. "It's a gift for Dad. I've already booked 4 seats." Delaney's smile faded. "You can't just buy one more." "Come on, Harper." "I've maxed the budget," I said. "And this isn't a vacation. It's a thank you." Silence. Then she leaned back in her chair, arms crossed. "You're just bitter. No one's ever chosen you first." The words slid across the table like broken glass. Dad looked away. Mom muttered something about family sticking together. Daniel glanced at his phone, bored. And I nodded. I didn't flinch. I didn't respond. I just nodded like someone who had already decided never to ask for anything again. That night I stayed awake staring at the ceiling. I wasn't angry. I was empty. There's a difference. Anger burns hot and fast. Emptiness just echoes. So I opened my laptop, pulled up the Emirates reservation, read every cancellation policy line by line. Then I booked a locksmith for Friday at noon. I wasn't just reclaiming my seat, I was reclaiming my name. If you've ever stood in a room full of people who claim to love you and realized they see you as useful, not loved, then maybe you understand. And if you've ever had to draw a line between generosity and survival, leave a comment. Let's name that line together. It was Thursday morning when I called Emirates to confirm what I already suspected. I kept my voice steady, calm. "Just double-checking my itinerary," I said, pretending to fumble through my confirmation code. On the other end, the woman was polite. Too polite. "Yes, Ms. Lane, your reservation was marked as a no-show due to a medical emergency." "A what?" "A medical emergency," she repeated. "A woman claiming to be your sister called last week and said you'd been hospitalized. She requested the ticket be transferred to her fiancé." My heart didn't race, it sank. Slowly. Like something heavy sliding off a ledge you didn't even know you were standing on. "I see," I said. I should note the agent added that international tickets under this fare class are non-transferable. So while the request was made, we did not process the name change. My hand was gripping the phone a little too tight now. "Did anyone attempt to check in under my name?" I asked. A pause. "Yes, a man presented the boarding pass yesterday morning. Our staff flagged the mismatch. There's now a fraud alert on the reservation." I sat in silence. Not disbelief, just confirmation. Daniel had tried to board a first-class flight, using my name. They didn't just erase me from the trip. They tried to become me. That's the kind of betrayal you don't see coming because you'd never dare to think people you love could be that calculated. I thanked the agent, filed the fraud report, submitted my ID, gathered every screenshot I'd taken of our family group chat. The one that said, "We've decided Daniel will go instead of you." The one that followed no conversation, no context, just a quiet decision made in a vacuum of entitlement. That night I returned to the spreadsheet. Next to the return flights, I wrote cancel, flag for misuse. Next to the hotel call, confirm ID required at check-in. One by one, I moved down the list, unbuilding a house I had once constructed for all of us to enjoy. And then I did something I hadn't done in 4 years. I logged into the smart lock dashboard for the condo and changed the access code. I watched the cursor blink on screen for a moment, then typed in the new code. The silence afterward. It felt like the first inhale after being underwater. I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was reclaiming. This wasn't payback, this was paperwork. Later that night, as I sat with my tea, I whispered it out loud to no one. I see you. And I did. I saw what I hadn't let myself acknowledge. They were never confused. They weren't making mistakes. They were making choices. And so was I now. If you've ever realized someone's been crossing your boundaries so quietly that you almost didn't notice they were trespassing, leave a like. Stay with me. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do isn't to yell or fight back. It's to reclaim the key they thought you'd never take back. And if you've ever done that, you already know. The silence that follows is not empty. It's sacred. Friday came like a slow inhale. The locksmith arrived at noon sharp. He was polite, efficient, didn't ask questions, just nodded when I told him to rekey every door in the condo. The front, the back, even the utility closet. I wanted no corner untouched, no leftover access point. By evening, I had new locks, 2 motion-activated cameras mounted discreetly near the front door, and a sleek video doorbell that sent alerts straight to my phone. I printed out a small notice and taped it just inside the window. Entry by non-tenants is subject to trespass law. Contact property manager. No one had a lease. No one had signed anything. For 4 years, I let love operate without paperwork. That ended today. Then I called the beachfront hotel in Dubai, the one I'd reserved under my name on my card months ago. Would someone be able to check in without the primary guest present? The woman paused. ID will be required at the front desk. Perfect, I said. Then I canceled the entire reservation. No refund. I didn't care. That night, I worked my way through the rest of the itinerary. Private desert safari gone. Falcon experience plus dinner under the stars canceled. Sunset yacht cruise revoked. Couples spa and cooking class erased. One by one, I watched confirmation emails turn into cancellation receipts. Each refund that arrived in my inbox felt like another tether cut. Not to the money, but to the story I'd been telling myself. The story where I was just misunderstood. Where maybe they didn't realize how much it hurt. Where if I gave enough, forgave enough, planned enough, they'd finally see me. But that was fiction, and now I was writing nonfiction, bold, precise, and final. The return flights were trickier. Emirates wouldn't cancel the outbound leg that Daniel had attempted to use, but when I explained the situation to the fraud department, they flagged the return flight for screening. If we see another mismatch at boarding, we'll escalate internally, the rep told me. I thanked her. Then I changed my credit card number. By 10 p.m., I was sitting on my couch, barefoot, laptop open, watching my condo's new security feed stream straight to my phone. The hallway was still. The porch was empty. But for the first time in years, it felt like mine again. And that's when it really hit me. They never thought I'd push back. Because people like me, the quiet ones, the dependable ones, the givers, were not supposed to fight. We're supposed to endure. We're supposed to keep showing up even after we've been erased. But I wasn't showing up anymore. I was locking the doors behind me. And just when I thought that was the end of it, the text messages began. The first came at 2:14 a.m. Harper, what did you do? There's no reservation. The guy at the desk just laughed at us. I turned my phone face down and went back to sleep. By morning, there were 12 more. Our lease. The excursions are gone. What's happening? Daniel broke his arm on the camel ride. Do you even care? You embarrassed us in front of his family. This is cruel. Cruel. Cruel was paying for a luxury trip only to be replaced like I was a booking error. Cruel was having my name used at airport security without consent. Cruel was being told, you're not photogenic enough to go. They wanted grace. I gave them a spreadsheet. And if you've ever been called cruel for enforcing a boundary, you should have set years ago. Leave a comment. Tell me how it felt to finally choose yourself, even if it meant letting others call you heartless. Because the truth is, they didn't need my kindness. They needed my compliance. And when I stopped giving it, the whole illusion fell apart. They had landed in Dubai expecting luxury. I could picture it so vividly, Daniel strolling into the marble-tiled lobby of the Jumeirah resort, his designer hoodie draped just right, expecting cold towels and someone to say, "Welcome, Mr. Lane." Instead, they were met with a blank stare and a clipped response. There is no reservation under that name. The text messages flooded in that morning like a rising tide. Delaney's tone shifted from confused to panicked to accusatory within 10 messages. You made your point. We'll sort it out when we get back. But this was cruel, Harper. Cruel. Cruel. That word again. I sat at my kitchen table staring at her text, then looked at my spreadsheet neatly organized, time-stamped, color-coded. Was it cruel to reclaim what was mine, to refuse to be exploited yet again? No. What was cruel was believing I owed them my silence just because we share blood. As the day wore on, another message came, a video clip. Daniel was sitting on a stone bench, cradling his arm in a makeshift sling, grimacing. In the background, Delaney was yelling at a cab driver. The kind of tourist drama I used to roll my eyes at. This time, I didn't even press play. I had no energy left for their chaos. Instead, I opened a browser tab and searched GoFundMe plus Thorn Lane, my father's name. And there it was. A campaign Delaney had started months ago, quietly titled, Help Dad Walk Again Surgery for Thorn. Goal $6,000. Raised $311. I stared at the page for a long time. I hadn't even known it existed. At the bottom was the big blue button, Donate Now. I clicked it. Entered $1. Under the name field, I selected Public. Under Message, I typed, From the daughter who wasn't invited. Then I closed the tab. Was it petty? Maybe. But more than that, it was proof. Proof that I was done playing the part of the quiet benefactor. The fixer. The replacement. If they wanted help, they'd have to ask without the weight of manipulation, without the twisted guilt trips they had perfected. And deep down, I knew they wouldn't. They'd twist this, reframe it, tell their side like I had gone rogue, like I had snapped over nothing. They'd say I was dramatic, unstable, selfish. Because that's what happens when you stop playing your assigned role in the family script. You become the villain in someone else's version. Still, I made myself tea, curled up on the couch, and watched the security cam feed from my condo. Still quiet. Still locked. A sanctuary now. Because finally, I had reclaimed the one thing they never thought I'd protect: my boundaries. And if you've ever had to watch someone distort the truth about you just because you stopped saying yes, take a second, breathe. You're not the villain. You're just the one who stopped performing. And if that truth has ever cost you your place at the table, like this video, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel. Let's keep building a community where people get to choose peace, not prove loyalty. They pulled into the driveway like nothing had happened. The black SUV I'd seen in the condo cameras crawled in slow, as if hoping to make an unnoticed arrival. But nothing goes unnoticed anymore, not since I took back control. My motion alert pinged the moment the tires touched gravel. I muted it and waited. From the passenger seat, Delaney waved through the windshield like this was a casual drop-in after Sunday brunch. Daniel stepped out slowly, his arm now wrapped in a sleek black sling designer hoodie layered over it like armor. His face wore that well-practiced expression, part wounded, part indifferent. A performance through and through. But my father Thorn didn't get out. He stayed in the back seat, barely visible. I could just make out the slight movement of his hands on his cane. I stepped out with a folder in my hand and met them halfway across the gravel. There were no hugs, no smiles, just dust and tension. "This is your new lease," I said, holding out the packet. $2,950 a month. First and last month due at signing. Utilities not included. You have 30 days. Delaney blinked at me like I'd spoken a foreign language. "Are you serious right now?" "I am," I replied. "You're evicting your own parents," she snapped, stepping closer. "I'm offering them a legal contract," I said evenly. "That's more than I got." Daniel snatched the papers from my hand like he expected them to dissolve on contact. He flipped through the pages, eyes scanning like a man pretending to look for loopholes he didn't understand. "This isn't how families work," he muttered. I looked directly at him and said, "Then it's a good thing we're not family." That landed like a slap. He scoffed. This whole thing could have been resolved with a conversation. I motioned to the lease in his hand. "That is the conversation." He shoved the packet back toward me like it was contaminated. "I'll have to run this by my advisor." I tilted my head. "Is that your dad and/or the camel?" Delaney gasped. Daniel's jaw tightened. I handed the papers back anyway, calm as ever. "You said you wanted a business, Daniel. This is it. Property contracts, payment terms, legal timelines. Consider this your final pitch." They didn't speak again. They turned around and walked back toward the car, the dust of the driveway rising with each step, like the smoke of a burned bridge. My father never rolled down his window. And as I walked back inside, I didn't slam the door. I didn't cry, I simply locked it. One click, clean and final. The papers still sat in Daniel's hands, but I knew he wouldn't sign them. They had always operated in shadows, assumptions, unspoken favors, whispered expectations. And now I was asking for clarity, contracts, truth. It was never going to sit well. If you've ever had to say the thing they never thought you'd say, if you've ever had to hand someone boundaries in a manila envelope, share your story in the comments. Because sometimes the real conversation isn't the one you scream in a fight. It's the one you write in legal language, clean binding, and free of apology. They never signed the lease. Not in week 1, when I emailed them the contract with a polite note. Not in week 2, when the property manager hand-delivered a hard copy in a stamped envelope. Not in week 3, when I received nothing but silence. Delaney stopped responding altogether. Daniel, true to form, sent a text saying, "We're reviewing our options," as if this were a boardroom standoff and not a daughter asking her family to respect her property. And my father, he never said a word. Not even a missed call. Just an echo of someone who used to carry me on his shoulders after school. I waited 30 days. I didn't chase. I didn't beg. I filed the eviction paperwork on a Wednesday morning. The clerk at the county office didn't flinch when I handed her the stack. Just stamped it, slid it into the intake tray, and handed me a confirmation slip like it was a receipt from the grocery store. 2 hours later, Daniel sent me a message. "You're opening yourself up to serious legal consequences. My attorney will be in touch." I replied with a screenshot of the official filing. No words. That night I listened to a voicemail from Delaney. She was crying. Not the broken kind of cry, more like the frustrated, cornered kind. "You tore this family apart over one stupid vacation," she said. "Over one seat on one plane." But it was never about the plane. It was about the pattern. The slow erosion of respect, disguised as jokes. The endless favors dressed as just this once. The way I was expected to fund everything, flights, homes, dreams, but never allowed to set a boundary without being accused of cruelty. And now that I had I was the monster. Later that week, I received an email from Mom. It started warm. She recounted how she once stayed up all night sewing my school play costume, how she made a cake from scratch when I turned 11. Then came the pivot. "I didn't think you were capable of this," she wrote. "I raised you better." Better. Better than what? Better than defending myself. Better than demanding rent on a condo they lived in for free. Better than expecting not to be erased from a trip I paid for. Not once did she apologize. Not for the messages, not for the ticket fraud, not for the seat they gave away like it wasn't tied to my name, not for saying I was bitter, or boring, or invisible. They danced around the truth like it was a fire they didn't want to get too close to, but I stood in it. I let it burn. And when it was done, all that was left was clarity. I forwarded the messages to my lawyer, Micah. He replied with one sentence, "Hold firm. Let the paperwork speak for you." So I did. I woke up the next morning, poured the same coffee into the same chipped mug, showed up to work 10 minutes early, and ate dinner in silence. Not loneliness, peace. Because sometimes healing doesn't come with fanfare or forgiveness. Sometimes it comes with quiet mornings and a locked front door. And if you've ever had to endure being blamed for the very wounds you were forced to bandage, let me know in the comments. You're not alone. You're not heartless. You're just done bleeding for people who never noticed you were the one holding the gauze. It was exactly 1 year to the day. Same porch, same fading paint, same uneasy silence just before the knock. I watched them from behind the sheer curtain, 3 familiar outlines I used to call family. My mother, Mira, stood in front. Delaney was behind, her arms crossed like she was physically holding herself together. And my father, Thorne, leaned on a cane, his body thinner than I remembered, his skin grayer. Time, it seemed, had finally caught up. They didn't ring the bell. I opened the door, but not wide. "We didn't come to fight," Mom said, voice softer than I'd heard it in years. I said nothing, just waited. "We've been doing a lot of thinking," she continued, "about how things went, about you." Delaney spoke next, her voice barely above a whisper. "Daniel's gone. He left when things got hard. He wasn't who we thought he was. Of course he left. That's what people like him do when the free ride ends." Thorne cleared his throat, but his words were slow, deliberate. "They say I need surgery, my knees. It's bone on bone now. Medicare won't cover it all." And there it was. The phrase again, "We just need a little help until we're stable." How many times had I heard that exact line back when they first moved into my condo? When rent was late again. When Delaney said it was just kombucha on my Instacart. When Daniel borrowed my MacBook for a pitch deck that never got built. It always started the same way, just until. But until never came. I didn't sigh, I didn't flinch. I just reached behind the door and handed them an envelope. Mom blinked. "What's this?" $3,000, I said. For the knee, that's it. Delaney took half a step forward. Are we okay now? I shook my head gently. No. This isn't reconciliation. It's accounting. None of them spoke. My father looked down at the envelope like it was both salvation and condemnation. Delaney looked away. Mira looked like she wanted to cry, but had forgotten how. I'm not angry, I said finally. I just don't owe you anything more than this. Mira reached out maybe for my hand, maybe just to touch something real. I didn't move. They left quietly. No dramatics. No last-ditch guilt trips. Just the shuffle of feet on gravel and a door that didn't need to be slammed. And as I closed it behind them, I knew something had changed. Not in them, in me. Because the old Harper would have invited them in, would have made tea, would have asked how they were holding up. But I wasn't the old Harper. I was the woman who'd watched her family lie, steal, and erase her, then expected her to be grateful for a seat at the table they rebuilt without her. If you've ever had to look someone you once loved in the eye and say, no, this isn't forgiveness, this is closure, drop a comment, share your moment, because there's nothing more courageous than turning the doorknob and choosing not to open it all the way. And if you've ever given your last ounce of grace only to be asked for more, leave a like, share this story, subscribe to the channel, because your boundaries are valid and your peace non-negotiable. $3,000. That's what I gave them, and that's where it ended. I knew what they wanted that day on the porch. Not just help, not just money. They wanted a reset. A do-over that required no apology, no acknowledgement, no accountability. They wanted to act like none of it ever happened, as if the trip, the betrayal, the fraud, the eviction were just misunderstandings that time could smooth over. But time doesn't erase debt, it just accrues interest. After they drove off, I stood at the window and watched the SUV shrink into the distance, fading into the late afternoon haze like a bad memory I finally stopped feeding. For a few days, everything was quiet. No knocks, no calls, no unexpected visitors. I slept like I hadn't in years. My shoulders began to relax in ways I hadn't even realized they were tense. I opened windows, let the breeze run through the condo, and breathed in air that wasn't thick with obligation. Then the message came. It was a single line, no punctuation, no greeting. Until you fix this, you're no longer our daughter. I read it once, then again, then a third time. It didn't hurt. Not the way I thought it would. It didn't even sting. Because I realized something in that moment. I had stopped being their daughter, the day they chose convenience over character. The day they sold my seat. I stared at the message for a full minute, then typed my response slowly, deliberately. I stopped being yours the day you sold my seat. Then I screenshotted the exchange and forwarded it to Micah, my attorney. He replied, documented, stay steady. The envelope I'd handed them still hadn't been cashed. It sat beside my phone, unopened, a quiet testament to how much they resented anything that didn't come on their terms. So I turned off my phone, packed a small weekend bag, no plans, no GPS, just keys, a toothbrush, and the need for silence. I drove west, letting the Colorado highways guide me like a whisper in the mountains. Windows cracked, radio low, the air cool against my face. I didn't check for texts. I didn't update my location. I wasn't escaping. I was arriving. Somewhere that wasn't built from expectations. I stopped in a small coastal town I'd always meant to visit but never had time for. Booked a room at an inn run by an older couple who gave me fresh linens and fresh advice. The ocean doesn't fix things, honey, but it sure reminds you what peace sounds like. That night I walked the cliffs until the light bled into the sea, let the cold bite my hands and the wind slap my cheeks awake. And when I fell asleep under unfamiliar sheets, without the weight of family on my chest, I dreamed for the first time in years, not of escape, but of stillness. No spreadsheets, no refund requests, no whispered guilt or conditional love, just me. And if you've ever had to turn your back on the people who gave you life in order to finally start living, let me know how you did it. Because this story isn't just mine. And if you're still holding on to someone else's expectations, subscribe. Join us. Because here we unlearn the guilt and relearn how to breathe. The first morning I woke up by the ocean, it felt like I'd stepped into someone else's life. I brewed hotel coffee that tasted like cardboard and freedom. Sat by the window of the tiny inn, feet tucked beneath me, staring out at gray waves crashing against jagged cliffs. There were no notifications, no calendar reminders, no missed calls, just stillness. And yet in that quiet my mind wandered back to one thing, that airplane seat. The one I paid for, the one they gave away, the one tied to my name, my passport, my identity. At first, it had felt like the ultimate insult, like being erased from a photo you took yourself. But now I didn't want that seat back. Not because I'd forgiven what they did, but because I finally understood what it symbolized. For so long, I'd treated that seat as proof of my place. If I could just show up, contribute, plan the best trips, solve the hardest problems, they'd see me. They'd choose me. But they never did. Because my place in the family wasn't earned or lost by what I gave. It was decided long before I ever booked a flight. That seat was never mine to keep because in their eyes I was always temporary. And suddenly that realization didn't break me. It freed me. Because if I wasn't chosen, then I didn't have to keep auditioning. I closed my laptop, left it on the desk, and took a walk through the sleepy streets of that coastal town. Past bookstores with creaky floors, cafes where the barista remembered my name after one order, elderly couples arguing about crossword puzzles in the sun. It was simple, unremarkable, and it was mine. That evening, I watched the sun drag itself below the horizon like a heavy secret. The sky burned gold and then dimmed to blue, and I stood there, coat zipped, high hands in my pockets, thinking, this is what healing looks like. Not dramatic, not loud, just quiet refusal. Refusal to carry weight I never agreed to hold. Refusal to sit in rooms where love had to be earned. Refusal to chase apologies that would never come. And when I got back to the inn there, it was a message. Not from them. From someone who had followed this story, someone who wrote I went through something similar. I gave, and when I stopped, they made me the villain. But I found peace. Eventually. I sat with that for a long moment. Then I typed back, peace isn't the absence of noise. It's knowing you no longer need to explain your silence. If you're listening to this and something in your chest just unlocked even a little, if you've ever looked at a seat at someone else's table and realized you don't need it anymore, tell me what that moment was. Drop it in the comments, let it out. Because healing begins where the audition ends. And in this space, you don't need to prove your worth to belong. By the time I returned to Denver, something inside me had settled. The trip wasn't long, just a weekend, but it shifted things. Like the ocean had sanded down the sharp edges I'd been carrying for years. I stepped back into my condo, and for once, it felt like mine. No tension in the air, no shoes in the wrong hallway, no stray coffee cups left behind by people who believed access was love. And yet healing doesn't mean forgetting. It just means remembering without flinching. 3 days after I got back, I found a thick envelope in my mailbox, a notarized copy of the finalized eviction paperwork. Micah had moved quickly. Even the legal language sounded calm, cold but fair. It stated that no lease had been signed, no rent paid, and no willingness to comply with the proposed terms. It confirmed what I already knew: they'd rather lose the roof over their heads than admit they had ever taken advantage of mine. That same afternoon, the cameras caught them returning. They came in silence, no attempt to knock, no show of defiance. Just cardboard boxes tightly packed and eyes that never once glanced toward the lens. I watched them move out in real time. No yelling, no final words, just movement. And yet 24 hours later, the texts returned. From Daniel, you're opening yourself up to serious legal consequences. We're not done. I didn't reply. I sent it straight to Micah. He flagged it. Then a voicemail from Delaney. Her voice broke in the middle. You tore us apart over one seat on one flight. You let a trip ruin everything. But again, it wasn't about the seat. It was about the space. The space where love should have lived. The space where respect should have been the default, not the reward. The space where I, the eldest daughter who gave too much for too long, was supposed to feel safe. They hadn't just sold my seat. They'd sold the illusion that I ever had one. Later that evening, an email from Mom landed in my inbox. The subject line, "Do you remember the birthday cake?" I knew what this was, a nostalgia trap. Inside, she wrote about my 11th birthday, how she'd stayed up all night making a cake shaped like a violin because I was taking lessons. How she burned the first two and cried when the third finally held its shape. And then the closing line, "I raised you better than this. I didn't think you could be so final." That was the word she chose, final. Not cruel, not heartless, just final. She wasn't wrong. I had become final. Because the Harper she remembered, the one who never asked for repayment, who smiled through tears, who handed over spare keys like they were hugs, that version of me had packed up and left the same day they handed my seat to someone else. I didn't respond. I forwarded the message to Micah and shut my laptop. Then I poured myself a glass of water and stood in my kitchen, just listening to the hum of the fridge and the distant traffic out the window. No one was asking for help. No one was taking without asking. No one was there. And yet I had never felt more whole. if you've ever been told you're the reason the family broke, when in truth, you were just the first one brave enough to stop pretending it was whole to begin with. Leave a comment. Speak your truth. Because clarity can feel cold, but it's also clean. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do is close the door and not open it again. The court date was set for 5 days later. I didn't change a thing about my routine. No dramatic preparation, no rehearsed speeches. I woke up, brewed the same black coffee in the chipped mug that still read, "Best sister ever, a gift from Delaney," back in college. Back when we still believed words were enough. I drove to work early, answered emails, reviewed server updates, ran performance checks like it was just another day. And maybe it was. Because by now I understood something I hadn't dared to admit before. They were never going to understand, not truly, not deeply, not in the way I had waited my entire adult life for. So I stopped waiting. I ate dinner alone. No candles, no music, just silence. And for the first time, the silence wasn't heavy. It was gentle. I slept deeply. No spreadsheets lingering in my mind. No ghost arguments running their loops. No imagined scenes where someone finally said sorry. It was quiet and clean and enough. The more they fought to stay in my space, legally, emotionally, symbolically, the more I realized they had never actually earned a place in it. They were used to occupying it, but not contributing to it. They knocked on my door exactly 1 year to the date of the original flight to Dubai. Symbolic, maybe. Or maybe they just ran out of places to go. I opened the door just wide enough to see them clearly. Delaney was holding herself again, arms crossed, chin tucked like someone afraid of being noticed. My father's cane hit the gravel slower now. And Mira, she didn't speak right away. That was new. "We've been thinking," she finally said, "about everything. The trip, the condo, you." Delaney added, "Daniel's gone. Left when everything dried up. Took my laptop with him." I didn't react. Thorne looked at me with a tired softness. "We just need a little help until we're stable." That phrase. The one I'd heard 1,000 different ways. Until, just until, only if. Promises without terms, needs without limits. I stepped away from the door, returned with another envelope. Thick, sealed, clean. "This is $3,000, I said. For the knee surgery, that's all." Delaney's eyes flicked to my hands. "So that's it?" I nodded. "That's it." She took a step forward. Are we okay now?" "No," I said. "This isn't reconciliation, it's accounting." None of them argued. Not because they agreed, but because they finally understood. I wasn't asking for their approval anymore. They accepted the envelope like it weighed more than money. It weighed truth. "I'm not angry," I said, "but I don't owe you anything beyond this." Mira reached out, maybe hoping I'd take her hand, but I didn't move. They walked away slower this time, not from injury, but from recognition. And I stood at the door watching them become smaller in the setting sun, 3 shadows, whose outlines no longer dictated the shape of my life. If you've ever reached the moment where "I forgive you" turned into "I release you," then you know. You know that closure isn't always soft. Sometimes it's solid, tidy, quiet. If you've made peace with giving your final payment to a bond that was never mutual, subscribe. Share your moment below. Let's be honest about the price of peace. A week later, another message arrived. Just one line. No greeting, no warmth, no punctuation. "Until you fix this, you're no longer our daughter." No explanation, no admission, no apology. Just a sentence tossed like a final stone through the glass of a house already abandoned. And I didn't feel angry, I didn't even feel surprised. What I felt was confirmation. They had finally said out loud what their actions had whispered for years. I wasn't theirs. Not in the way that matters. I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed my reply. "I stopped being yours the day you sold my seat." Then I took a screenshot of both texts and forwarded them to Micah, who responded within minutes, logged. "Let me know if anything else comes through." Paper trails had become my second language. I turned off my phone and placed it beside the envelope, the one with the check for the surgery still uncashed. I didn't chase them to take it. I wouldn't remind them. I wouldn't argue. Because I wasn't trying to fix anything. I was closing the ledger. Then I packed a small bag, just a few essentials. No laptop, no list, and I left the condo without telling anyone. I drove with the windows down, letting Colorado air braid through my hair. The roads curved like ribbon through the mountains, and for once I didn't care where I was going. I stopped in a tiny town I'd seen on postcards but never visited. Checked into a local inn where no one knew my name. Walked the cliffs alone at dusk, letting the cold bite my hands. I didn't check my phone, didn't scroll, didn't wait for updates or apologies that would never come. Instead, I sat on a bench overlooking the water and listened. To the waves, to the wind, to the sound of a silence I had finally earned. And that night, as I curled beneath unfamiliar blankets, I felt something I hadn't in years safe. No spreadsheets, no calls, no guilt dressed as tradition. Just me. And in the morning, I stood by the window sipping coffee from a chipped mug and thought about that airplane seat one last time. The one with my name, my intention, my gift. The one they gave away. And I realized something simple but life-changing. I don't want it back. Not because I've forgotten what it cost me, but because I've stopped investing in what won't yield peace. That seat was never about the destination. It was about recognition. And when you finally stop asking people to see you, you start seeing yourself. So this is the end of their story and mine, and the beginning of mine without them. If you've ever had to walk away from what was supposed to be love from people who thought their access to you was permanent, I hope you find the courage to say no more. And if you believe in the right to reclaim your space, your voice, and your freedom, subscribe. Leave a comment. Share this story. Let's build a community where family is defined not by blood, but by respect. I used to believe that family was something unchangeable like blood or birth dates or last names, something permanent, immutable, sacred. But I've learned that family isn't defined by who's listed in your contact list. It's defined by who shows up without entitlement, who loves you without measurement, who respects your boundaries even when they don't benefit from them. The truth is, walking away from people you once built your life around doesn't make you heartless. It makes you honest. There is no blueprint for healing after betrayal by those closest to you. No perfect script for reclaiming your power without shattering your past. But sometimes peace comes not with a reunion, but with a release. I didn't get the apology I deserved. I didn't get the understanding I hoped for. But I got something better myself. And now I sit here not waiting for their return, not drafting one last explanation, not checking my phone in the dark. I sit with stillness, with truth, with a heart that may be bruised but finally beating for its own rhythm. If you've ever made the hardest choice to walk away from chaos and choose quiet to give up the illusion and reclaim your reality, then know this. You are not alone. You are not broken. You are free. And if you're still holding on, still hesitating at the threshold, may this be your sign. Take the step, close the door, begin again. This is where the healing starts, right here with you.